saying our prisons are actually a majority black and brown people?
Why does it have to be majority?
No.
Why does it have to be majority?
But then what is it then?
Well, it's something like 30% black. But
Right, okay, so then it's not. So therefore it's still more white people.
Yeah, but this is per
Obviously.
capita. But out of a population of 3% black, if the prison population is 30% black, it should be 3% black to be accurately represented. Right? Muslims as well are also massively
and so are white people. And so are white, as they should be, because we are a majority white country.
Yeah, but white people are not. They're underrepresented in the prisons. Ahmed has no right to any state benefits from the British state. 47% of London's social housing is going to immigrants. Some foreigner is taking your money to slack around in a house all day.
You're saying that actually there are people born in this country that also are a drain and a burden to our system. Yeah. They're allowed because they're white.
They're British.
The hue of you.
They're British. It's not about hue. It's about lineage. Has there been a single person with brown skin who has ever been convicted of a hate crime? Right. The only ones I ever see are white English people.
Who are, then they shouldn't hate then.
Carl Benjamin, who is a British YouTuber. If you like this kind of content and you don't know who he is, you might want to check out his channel. It is excellent. He recently had TV host, commentator, and village idiot Narinder Kaur on his show, where she got absolutely destroyed, and it was terrific. As usual, guys, the timestamps are in the video. You can skip to the part that you want. Let's get it.
That is true, because his parents were part of the British Imperial Administration.
Right, and so they
heavily recruited from India.
And they went over. Right.
Yes. And
his parents came over as immigrants.
Yeah.
Right, economic immigrants, may I just add.
But who asked for that?
This country.
But what does that mean? Because the average person didn't ask for it. And you can see...
When you say the average person doesn't ask for it, and that's the argument about the whole immigration.
Yeah.
The average person didn't ask for it, but your average person isn't doing the jobs that need doing, right? Let's get right down to it, Paul.
I don't think that's
the average person in Britain does not want to clean someone else's bum, right? So you've got to get your economic.
That's true. I mean,
really,
for a start, like,
okay, find me one right now who British person, British born, who wants to clean the bum of some elderly people for the rest of their life on £10.33 an hour.
Well, 75% of care is done by British people.
British, yeah, but they're still brown.
No,
they're brown and black people. Brown and black people.
White English is 75% of England's care system.
You know what? The NHS and the care system, social care system in this country
white English
would collapse without migrants. It would collapse. This country, the NHS, social care workers, they would collapse.
But that's true. But that's only because a quarter of the country is migrant.
But then what's your point about...
My point is that the NHS didn't collapse before they arrived.
What time are you talking about? Because this country has always relied upon migrants. It's always relied. If you weren't going around, colonizing countries in half the world, you did a great job on that, pat on the back, yes? If you weren't doing that, then when you did come back, when you had to come back, because actually the country said, we're not having this anymore, then you came back, because guess what you did then? You couldn't carry on with just your country doing your own jobs with your own people. You didn't, because my dad was invited over to this country, and my uncles, my granddad.
Yeah.
First of all, they fought in World War I and World War II and died. My in-laws, my husband's great-granddad.
Yeah.
Then they've come over to this country because they were invited to come over, as if that makes it better, to do the jobs that my dad worked in the steel foundries in West Bromwich because no one else would do them. Needed double, treble shifts. Now,
hang on. Right. So I'm not saying that you weren't invited to come by the British state.
Because you're saying, why were we invited?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, Dave.
You said what? Well, because they wouldn't, because the jobs needed doing.
I don't think that's true. Right.
Okay, it was a lie, Carl.
No, hang on. Right. If the jobs didn't have anyone to do them, why was Thatcher's decommissioning of the mining system and the steel industry such a devastating blow for the north of England that was 95% white? Right. They did these things. They did do these things, and they took pride in doing these things.
Of course, I'm not saying Indigenous people didn't.
Hang on, right? Yeah, but that's the point, right? So I'm not saying that your dad, your granddad, whoever, didn't serve, didn't work hard, and didn't do something that was very useful. Right? That is definitely true. My granddad did the same.
Right.
He was a farmer. Right. I'm not saying that's not true, but what the problem with the narrative as you're laying it out, it implies that the English did nothing. And actually, they were almost all of it, right? The migrants, for example, in 1961, right, 3% of this country was of immigrant background,
Right.
and half of that was Irish,
Yeah.
right? So that's a tiny sliver. You would never notice them, right?
Yeah.
So,
And
no,
what's the percentage now then? It's still not the majority.
no, it's 25%.
Right.
So, but the country worked fairly well back in the 60s, like the NHS.
There is no doubt that these countries that give benefits to migrants, their healthcare system is suffering. It is breaking because of it. Canada is no different. All the countries in Europe are no different that have had immigration at these levels. There was a point that most Western countries, including America, we used to let immigrants in at 1% a year, 1% of the population, and you can assimilate that and you can vet people properly. And this way you end up with people that you actually want in your country, right? That can speak the local language, that have a skill that your country might need, yada, yada, yada. But that's not what we have now. Trump closed the border, but these other countries still have those issues. The UK has those issues. Canada has those issues. There was a time that the Canadian healthcare was a great healthcare system, but mass immigration has broken it. They don't have enough nurses. They don't have enough doctors. For example, look at these numbers for Canada. This is the wait time in weeks that you would wait after your family doctor would recommend a specialist to you to actually see that specialist. Look at it. Prince Edward Island, 77 weeks. If you have chronic pain or you're dying, you'd be dead. That's over a year. In America, during the Biden administration, Americans would spend $200 billion a year to feed, house, and give Medicare to illegal migrants. And that is what Carl is saying here. Nobody invited these people in, and they're burden on the taxpayer. We can't even get decent roads, but yet we're giving health care and housing to people that shouldn't be here, that were not invited here, and not a lot of times spend their whole time undermining our Western values. Let's get back to it.
It wasn't because they served. They came over because they were invited to do the jobs.
Well,
That's how my
you
dad.
said he was in the army.
That was great granddad's.
Yeah,
But my dad was invited over because to do the jobs. And the same thing's happening now. You've got migrants coming over to do the.
No, right. No one's inviting the migrants at the moment, right? The migrants are just being given a free rein.
They're not free rein. They're given work visas, right? So you can't just come over. You know these myths.
The restrictions on that is very low.
We need to bust these myths. Yeah, let's go down these myths.
Hang on. No. Okay, that's not true. Hang on. That's not true, right? Tony Blair and Gordon Brown both sent out literal search parties to go and find people to come over, right?
Why?
Because there is this very mistaken belief that the sheer number of people in a country translates into economic growth.
But that's not, are you saying that's a myth then? Because actually, immigration and migration coming into any country, whether it's Britain, America, wherever, it contributes towards your net production.
Not if they're dependents.
If they're dependents or they bring dependents, which one?
Both. I mean, if when an
economic migrant comes over, whether it's low skilled, whatever skilled you want to call it, yes, they're coming on a work visa. They're young. They're coming over on a work. Majority are coming on a work visa, and they have to show on that work visa that they're able to provide for any dependents, wife, kids. They have to be able to show that they're contributing to the economy of this country.
If that was the case, why is half of London, London's social housing, immigrant born?
Immigrant born?
Yeah. As in they were born overseas.
Right.
They've come to Britain and now they've got social housing in London.
Well, London, I guess it's
true,
capital city.
Right? Yeah, but,
everyone comes
but the
here.
point is it's just not true.
But they're spending money. You know, whether they're coming over, whether
they're spending my money.
They're not, but they're not spending your.
They are.
But they're
my tax money.
But they're spending it, putting it back into the system.
I don't care. I don't want to have my tax money.
We need growth.
But that's not growth. Hang on.
Let me finish this point because I will forget this point.
Go on.
This country alone, without economic migrants, the average wage is 30K. So they're not contributing to the system. So who are you picking on? You're picking on migrants. So migrants coming over, they're spending the money, they're putting it back into the spending shops, spending it restaurants, spending on food, spending their money, yeah? They're earning money.
Spending my money.
Yes, but guess who else is spending your money? British-born people who are also sat on their bums at home.
Yeah, I know. I don't like that either.
Right.
If that helps.
Right.
But the thing is, I can't.
Thank you for letting me make my point there.
That's okay. I can't get rid of the British-born people who are spending my money. Right. I don't like that they're spending my money.
So how many is there? How many have we got who are on benefits in this country?
Plenty.
Who will not work, can't work, won't work?
Hang on, stop, right. I'm not saying that's not the case, right? But I can't get rid of those people. Like, those people have got nowhere else to go. They come from here. They're our problem. But
But
someone
you're
who,
not dealing with them anyway.
what?
You can't deal with them,
It doesn't matter, right?
right? Okay,
The point
irrelevant.
is, okay, I agree that those people shouldn't be working.
Right.
But then why should Ahmed from wherever come over and also join them?
He's not doing them because Ahmed,
No,
you're
but
putting
he
them,
is.
you're putting Ahmed, okay, let's say Jatinder, yeah? Let's
Sure.
use the Punjabi name, let's use
Okay.
a Polish name, any name,
Yeah,
yeah?
sure.
You've gone on the Muslim name, and really, oh wow, we always just direct straight to the Muslim.
It's
Ahmed's
just because there are
gonna
millions
okay,
of them.
Ahmed comes over,
Yeah.
yeah? And he's of younger working age.
Yeah.
You know, in this country, the ratio to the younger generation,
Yeah.
who obviously school age, the children, babies, whatever,
Yeah.
to the old age pensioners who are also, which they're also dependent on the tax that we bring into this country, on our tax, on that bag of money that we've got. We need these young people coming in
No,
because they're working.
they're not.
They're
They're not. That's the problem.
They are working. Who told you they're not working? Who
The
said
Office of
they're not working?
The Office of National Statistics.
Are you talking about this report?
So
Because there's a lot of reports that prove
There are lots of reports that prove
there's
lots
lots of
things.
reports. So if we
Hang
go
on,
down this
stop,
report,
stop,
that
stop,
report,
stop. Right. So what you're throwing at me
yes,
are the mainstream defenses for things that are designed to flatten out the thing into a yes or no categoric answer, right? And it's not that easy.
yeah. Let's not make it black and white.
So
Okay.
the problem
Yeah.
is that Ahmed has no right to any state benefits from the British state.
But he's not getting state benefits.
He is.
He's come on a work visa.
No, hang on.
And without a work visa, if he's come over illegally, he won't get any
I'm not talking about
benefits.
illegals. I'm talking about legals. Right?
Okay, but then they've got a work visa.
No, but that's not the case, and we know this because 47% of London's social housing is going to immigrants. Right.
Let's
So
talk about it all.
no. I really want to hammer on this point. Right.
Okay.
So this is a categoric injustice to the tax-paying people of Britain. You are one of these people.
Yeah, we do. We
who were
pay.
born and raised in Britain,
Yeah.
and some foreigner is taking your money to slack around in a house all day.
Who
How
said
are
they're
you-
slacking around in a house? Where's your proof on that? Where's your
Because they-
evidence on that?
Because they need social housing, right? If you're working hard, you don't need a social house.
But then you say that to the people who are born in this country as well, because
Yeah, I
they're
do
also
say
sat in
that. I
social
do
housing.
say that. But
then
there's a difference here.
what's the difference?
because they
Colour
are-
of skin,
They're
the
British.
hue of your.
They're British. It's not about hue. It's about lineage,
But
right? They don't come from somewhere else.
okay,
Ahmed
Carl.
Comes from someone else. He has a country, a family, a history, a lineage in a different country. And now he's arrived on our shores, and the
To
British government.
help the economy.
I don't
You know,
care.
when
No,
they're
it doesn't matter.
working and they're working, they're
But he's not.
contributing.
He's not helping the economy if he's being given a social house. That is
Okay.
a drain on the economy.
That's also a myth.
It's not a
The
myth.
drain on this economy
It's
is
not a myth.
also people born. You're saying, okay,
I'm not saying.
okay,
that
this is
people
what you're
born here
saying.
aren't a drain as well.
Okay, this
They
is what you're
can
saying.
be.
Okay, I understand what you're saying now.
Right.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Feel free.
You're saying that actually there are people born in this country that also are a drain and a burden to our
Yeah.
system, to our infrastruccture, to et cetera, et cetera. But actually they're allowed because they're English,
We can't get rid of them.
right? They're allowed because they're white,
No, they're allowed because the government's soft.
right?
But
okay, but the Ahmed from wherever isn't allowed because he's a foreigner.
And so what we have is a system of perverse incentives where we're not only, and I think it's a total failure on the part of the British to allow any percentage of their population to do that. Right? I'm totally against that.
Against,
Against just a welfare state.
right?
I do
Yeah.
not like a welfare
Okay.
state. Right? But then to say, okay, we're going to have open borders. And so some rando can come over and then he can claim it as well. That's mad, isn't it?
Well, you're saying open borders. We've never had open borders,
We haven't.
firstly. We've
Okay,
never had open borders, firstly.
hang on.
Secondly, no, you're not letting me finish and you've spoken. Firstly, we've never
Sure.
had open borders. Secondly, some rando coming over and just claiming. They don't. They come
They
over
do.
on a work. I've said it again and we're
Yeah,
going
but
to
it's
keep
not
going round
true.
in circles. They're
It's not
working.
true.
From what I see people working hard. I see young
Yeah, but
men
I'm not saying
and
none
women
of them work.
working
I'm
hard.
not saying none
Right.
of them work.
So, but they
But
do
the
work.
problem,
Oh, you
no,
can agree they do work.
no. That's the thing. You're trying
you're
you're
agreeing they
trying to
work.
collapse this down into either yes or no. That's not the case. So, for example, out of the 1.2 million that came in last year, something like
Mhm.
350,000 got work visas.
Right.
Right, so that's most of them not on a work visa.
So how did they come over? On what?
So
then?
if you're going to collapse this down into a yes or no, your point's wrong.
No, but then how did they come over
Some
then?
student visas, dependence visas, stuff like this.
Right, student visas, because the universities need the money. So who's failing us that?
Yeah, okay, great. Now the universities...
The universities
are not...
students.
The universities should not merely be for economic benefit. Again, it's a perverse incentive.
But take that up with the government then. They're not giving the universities any money.
To,
yes.
But the government are the ones letting them 1.2 million a year.
Right.
Right. So they are funneling into this same system.
Why? Okay, but then why? Therefore, your anger and your should be directed at the government, not who they're letting in. That's not their fault.
Well, that's
not their fault then. They're like, okay, you're inviting us, we'll come over.
Some of these people are not very nice, yes. Some of these people...
Well, you mean the immigrants that are... Some of them are absolutely lovely and petrified
some of them are,
and can't even
some
work.
Of them aren't, right? And this is the problem. There's very little discernment in the quality
when you say
of the
some of them aren't, what? Tell me.
Okay, well, let's take let's take the grooming gangs, for example.
Oh wow, I definitely don't want to go down that route.
Why? Because they're a really great example of foreigners who have come here and really abused our hospitality.
Were they not British born? Some of them.
No, a lot of them are going to be immigrant born. Right? I mean, maybe 1 or 2 are British born, but the point is, it's an immigrant community. Right, and this is the real issue.
You're talking about rare cases, and I'm not talking about grooming.
It's not rare.
I'm talking about when people. I don't want to go down the grooming. Let's not go down that.
Something like 10% of Rotherham's male Muslims are involved in the grooming gangs. But that's not rare, right?
But then how many white paedophiles have you got? English paedophiles?
I don't know.
Look at the one up in Scotland.
What difference does it make?
Because you're the one who's you brought in the ethnicity. And actually, Suella Brodman was corrected on that. And she was having to apologise because she said the ethnicity was Pakistan. That was false. It was false.
No,
now,
it's not false. The grooming gangs are mostly Pakistani. That's not false.
Okay, right. I don't want to go down that route.
It's 86%.
Because you could, if we're going to talk about paedophiles, you've got.
I'm not really interested in talking about paedophiles.
I don't want to go down that route.
I'm interested in talking about the fact that if you have what is effectively an open system ripe for abuse, then you invite the people in foreign countries who are willing to abuse the system to just come and abuse it.
Abuse the system as in the benefit system.
The benefits, the fact, I mean, like, has there been a single person with brown skin who has ever been convicted of a hate crime?
They've been convicted of many things.
But has that, no, I asked.
I don't know. I don't know. Can we get the figures up? Maybe they have. I don't know.
I can't find it broken down by ethnicity. And the only ones I ever see are white English people.
Who are, then they shouldn't hate then.
No.
Then they shouldn't hate.
No, because
then they shouldn't commit a crime.
What we shouldn't have.
You've got no faith in our justice system.
I don't know. It's terrible.
Right.
Because it seems to be racially targeted against the English. Right. We have literal laws.
There's no evidence of that, Cole.
There
seems to be. There's no evidence on that.
Evidence is where we derive that
immigrants are also doing crime, and these are all myths. There's no ethnicity
they are
commits
not
more crime than the other. No ethnicity in this country commits more crime than the other.
Why would you
say that? They don't. Why would because there's no evidence to prove that brown people commit more crime.
What evidence would you look for?
What do you mean?
What would be evidence that there's a difference in criminality between ethnicities?
Because there's sorry, explain that. What do you mean?
Like if you were
statistics.
Yeah, statistics. Like if you were looking for statistics to suggest that one ethnic group was more prone to commit criminal acts than another, what kind of statistics would you look for?
Well, the government official statistics is what I'd be looking for.
But what kind of statistics? What would it show? Prison population, maybe?
Yeah, go on then. You tell me. I don't know.
Then it's definitely that some ethnicities commit more crimes than others.
No.
Muslims and blacks are massively overrepresented in prisons.
White people are overrepresented in prisons.
No, they're underrepresented.
I don't know. That's not true, Carl.
It is absolutely
None of this is true.
No, it's
you are just making up things.
I'm not making up anything.
It's not true.
Why would I make it up?
Are you saying our prisons are actually a majority black and brown people?
Why does it have to be majority?
No.
Why does it have to be majority?
But then what is it then?
Well, it's something like 30% black. But
right, okay, so then it's not. So therefore it's still more white people.
Yeah, but this is per capita. But out of a population of 3% black, if the prison population is 30% black, it should be 3% black to be accurately represented. Right?
You said it's 30%. I need to see that. I don't believe that at all. Well, I don't believe that at all. Maybe a prison where there's more
Muslims as well are also massively
and so are white people, and so are white, as they should be, because we are a majority white country.
Yeah, but white people are not. They're underrepresented in the prisons.
Right? No,
it is the case. But the thing is, why wouldn't it be the case? Like, what are you appealing to?
Because what I'm saying to you is because we're a majority white country.
Yeah, but when you say there's
Obviously, we're a
but you
majority
said
white
there's no
country.
difference. Why would there be no difference?
What do you mean no difference in
the criminality rates of
yes.
different ethnic groups? Why would there be no difference?
Because we can't target. There's no proof to target that black or brown people commit more crime. There's absolutely no
absolutely proof.
evidence to that. No,
Of
there's
course there
not.
is.
There's absolutely no evidence to that.
Look at the stabbings.
Absolutely
Look
not.
at stabbings, right? Like black teenagers are massively represented in this.
In London, but not in Liverpool or Newcastle.
Yeah, but
then you've got white majority stabbings.
Yeah, of course.
So then therefore you've got to keep it like.
Yeah, but even when you break down the data
in London, maybe,
no, but it's
but not in Newcastle, Manchester. Then you've got white crime. Then you've got white knife crime.
I appreciate that, but the amount of it per capita is lower, right? So but no.
Paul, I just feel, I want to have, and you look.
Yeah, but this is a real thing. This is true.
I just feel.
This is real. But no, the question is, why can't we talk about that honest?
I want you to, and I want to sit here and I want to understand each other. And what I'm getting from you, Carl, is you're going on colour a lot. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that either, by the way.
It's just the way the government breaks down the data, right?
Yeah.
They say Asian, black, white, English,
yeah,
white,
but
British.
You seem to be going like you've got, like we were talking in the green room there, and you really believe in Britain, England just staying England, Britain being Britain, and this little island, and no one can come in and no one can go out, and this is us.
No, I don't.
That doesn't make us great. That's not what
I'm not saying
what puts the great
I'm not
into Britain.
saying
What puts the great into Britain?
Literally the islands themselves, right? Great Britain.
So not the people, not the vibe,
No,
not the culture, not
literally,
the this.
Literally, the term Great Britain just means the main British island and the.
I know, but you're literally talking. I'm asking you what makes Great Britain. I'm not talking just islands.
I don't think we're a very great country at the moment, right? I think actually we're in a real nadir at the moment.
Why is that?
Because we're not respecting our own country. We're not respecting ourselves. We're not respecting the traditions and history.
How do we respect our? Okay.
Right. Okay. Well,
How am I not respecting the country?
Well,
How should I respect the country more?
It's no different in any Western country. It's the same in America. It's the same in Sweden. It's the same in Switzerland. It's the same in Canada. Pick a Western country. It's the same in Ireland. Black people are represented at double or more what they're represented in the population when it comes to prisons. Take a look at this. This is England. This is what they're talking about here. This is the UK. Black people, 4% of the population. Prison population, 12%. 3 times the white population, 81%, represented at 71%. The Asian population represented less. And the Asian population that they count here, this is mostly Pakistani people, Indians. That's what they count as Asians. We're not talking about Vietnamese and Chinese and Japanese people here. And then mixed, I guess, would be whoever else. But you can see that this is a big problem, and it's no different in any Western country. And we have a priority to our citizens. Like a lot of these people were not born in the UK. A lot of our prisoners were not born in the US. And we already have a problem. This is what he's talking about. We already have a problem, let's say in America, with American-born citizens. They already commit crime. We already have that issue. So why are we importing the issues of other countries? Why are we letting people come in illegally into the country when left in America says that white people commit more crimes than illegals? Sure, it's just a numbers game. There's more Americans and white Americans than there are illegals from other nations. But at the same time, that's not the point. The point is we have to deal with our own problem, no matter how bad they are, right? They can be PDF files, and they still have to be dealt with in America. We just can't ship them to Iran. It'd be great to, but we can't do that because they're born in America and they're American citizens, and we have to deal with them. And in that case, they do get due process. But why should we take care of people from other nations? Let's get back to it.
Sure. You seem to take the position that is directly against the interests of the average British person, right? Which is weird because it's also your interest, right? You're actually quite similar to most British people.
Yeah.
You're married, you've got a couple of kids, you work, you pay taxes. Like, so I can only assume it's because of ethnicity that you find yourself on the other side of that. Because why would you want Ahmed taking your money to live and sloven around in a house?
Because
But
I don't think Ahmed is coming over and slobbering around the house.
he
I'm a little
is.
bit more annoyed that John up in Newcastle is slobbering around the house
But that's
also.
right.
And
So,
actually, he's been given all the opportunities.
so
for
it is a
whereas
question of
Ahmed
ethnicity.
is coming over with hunger, and he's coming over
but you
with,
don't know
actually, I
that.
want to make something with my life.
Yeah, but you don't
I
know
don't
that.
understand. I do know that
You
because
don't.
I do know that because my dad, uncles, and everyone came with
Yeah,
the
but they're
same.
not Ahmed.
Guess what? But they were Ahmed back
No,
in the
they weren't,
50s and
though.
60s. They were the
Ahmed
exact
never
same
served in the British
person.
Army.
No, but that
But
was
Ahmed never did.
Ahmed's great-granddad may have served in the
He may have
army.
done, but
A
Ahmed
lot of
didn't.
Muslims did.
Yeah, I'm not saying
Carl,
they
a
didn't.
lot of Muslims
I'm
did.
not saying
But
they
what I'm
didn't.
saying
But
to you
this
is,
particular one did.
I do want them to
Right?
come over because I
Why?
want them, because the NHS being propped up by Asian
Oh, it's
doctors.
bollocks.
It's not absolute nonsense. That's an absolute
No, no,
fact.
hang on.
Fact that the NHS. Guess what? When I'm poorly, Ahmed,
Yeah.
guess who delivered my baby daughter, and I was bleeding. It was Mohammed, actually. He was called Dr. Mohammed.
Mhm.
Absolutely brilliant. Saved my life. I want
Yeah.
them to come over and contribute to our NHS and our, how would you have a waiter, a driver, a taxi driver? That's Ahmed, that's Mohammed. They're doing all these
Do you
jobs.
think we didn't
that
have these things before he arrived?
Well, I've never seen. No, I've never.
Right, okay. No, but this speaks to much more
Actually,
deep
no.
problems.
Actually, they do. Actually, Britain. Listen, Colin.
we
I think
didn't
you
have
have to
waiters.
accept. You have to accept.
Come on.
We had waiters back then, but they're not going to do the jobs anymore.
Why?
John up in Newcastle isn't going to do that job because he wants more than 1033.
If you go to an
He
English
wants
town,
more.
you'll get an English waiter.
Yeah, no, actually, I don't think you will. I think you'll get
I know you will.
Ahmed. I think you'll get Ahmed. So I
don't.
tell you why. Because they think we're not going to bother being a waiter for 12, 15, 16 hours a day. Because guess what? We'll get it from the benefit
Right,
system.
okay,
It's Ahmed that's keeping
Right,
up.
hang on, let's stop.
He's propping up every single...
Hang on. Right, so what we've done is we've made up a narrative of what's in the mind of the average British person, and they are bad, lazy.
I didn't say
slovenly.
that. Yeah, you said that.
No, but this is the characterization I would take, right?
You said that about Ahmed. You said Ahmed slovenly in the house. He's been given a house 5 bedrooms.
Hang on, right? But and so like if a restaurant opens in a city that's in a town that's like 95% English, for some reason we won't get British waiters. I mean, like,
well, since Brexit, oh my God, you think you've got your British workers in Costa Coffee and they can't serve a coffee fast enough.
But all immigrants are all hardworking industrialists and just want to contribute to prop up the NHS. Again, stop. We've narrowed it. We've literally compressed millions of people down to two things, right? So how does your narrative account for the fact that 47% of social housing in London goes to immigrants? How are they hardworking? How are they propping up the NHS?
Because you've just taken one city out of an entire country and given me because
I mean, we
most
can go
immigrants
through,
come over to but
Birmingham is a good example where it's a city with high immigration and
but
really,
let's talk
really
about
poor economic engagement.
Yes,
right?
No,
but that speaks to the character of those people.
But what you keep failing to do, and I understand because look, we're both somewhere in the middle. We're meeting here because we're saying actually. You're saying Ahmed doesn't bring anything. I'm saying John Smith, but you've also agreed with that. And where I think you're coming from is that you need me to agree that actually there are some immigrants who are lazy.
Yes.
Of course.
Right.
Because that wouldn't be human if they weren't. I would be stupid. That would make me stupid if I didn't agree. Sure. Actually, there are some immigrants.
But notice your narrative compresses them all into one group.
But so did yours, because you put Ahmed, all brown people, into one group as well. You you did the same call. Yeah. You're as guilty as me.
I appreciate that I'm in this discussion doing that.
You did that and I did that. We've both done our little narrative there.
So let's now get back into a more three-dimensional view. And we can ask, for example, what right does someone who was born outside of the UK have a priori, in advance, to benefits in the United Kingdom?
But they don't.
Well, there we go. Right.
But they don't.
Right. But hang on.
They're not coming over.
No. Hang on. You say that, but 47% of London.
So you think that Ahmed is coming over and he's signing straight on? Is that what you actually believe?
Right.
Some, but not all. Not the majority.
Sure, but
the
it should
majority.
Be zero, right? It should be zero.
Well, that's impossible.
Why?
And they're actually not coming over.
Why is it impossible?
Because Ahmed can't come over unless he's got a work visa. He can't come over and just sit on his bum.
Yeah, but we've already talked about this.
This country doesn't allow that.
We absolutely do allow that.
We don't allow that. We allow our own to do that because obviously we can't change that, like you said.
Like, for example, I mean, you can't book the hotel. Hang on. You can't book the hotel that's just over there.
Yeah.
Because it's full of Ahmeds who are getting government money.
Because that's because they're not, because of the processing or call. That's not their fault.
It is
Have you
their
ever
fault.
spoken to any of them?
The country.
listen,
They deliberately chose to break in.
They didn't break into the
They
country.
illegally
These
came over.
people are actually fleeing for their life,
they're not.
right? They want to
not.
work. If you actually,
The term
was listening to
refugee should exclude men.
they're the ones who come and work because
No, but
guess what?
they shouldn't be able to be refugees.
But I tell you what, when my dad and uncles and everyone came over, it was 10 men that all came over first.
Sure.
My mum and my aunties all came over about 3-4 years after that. So the men come over because they set up. They set up over,
Yeah.
they do the work because my mum was at home with my brother, my elder brother, and then she came over and then my other brother was born about 8 years after because that was the gap that they had to come over, work, get a house
Yeah.
and get some money in and then bring them over.
So the 47% on social housing haven't done that.
But that's but I do, look.
No, because this is the thing, right? I agree that
47% of
Yes.
housing, but then let's look at the 40% of housing or the percentage of housing up, say, in
No,
Newcastle or
because
Scotland,
no,
which
because
will
I
be
want
full
to
of
address this
white
thing.
people
I
who are
want-
getting the housing.
And I don't like that, but I want to address this thing,
Right.
right? Because at least being British born does give you before the event claim to British benefits, right?
You see the boats come into the UK and all the European countries, and even in America through the southern border when they were coming in, it's all military-aged men. They're not coming here to seek asylums. They're not bringing their families and their wives. If you were really fleeing a war-torn country, you would come with your wife and kids. You wouldn't leave them there. You'd be scared for their safety. Imagine you have a daughter or a little son. There's no way you're coming here by yourself. These people are not fleeing economic despair. They're not fleeing persecution. They're coming here false pretenses. They came to try to make money in the richest country in the world. That causes a lot of problems, as we know: fentanyl, human trafficking, women trafficking, children trafficking. The southern border run by the cartels. They have to pay the cartels in order to cross into America. You're enriching a drug cartel who then uses that money to buy politicians, to pay off the police. There's nothing good about it. If you don't have a border, you don't have a country. And what Carl's talking about in this video when he says, sure, 300,000 of them have work visas. That's still too many, in my opinion. They're not doing jobs that British people don't want to do. Often when you see these companies, and I think in the US, the companies should have been held accountable as well. These companies that were hiring all these illegals, they should have been fined. They should have been charged. Put the onus on them. If you stop the companies from hiring these people, the people will stop coming. And if you had to fine a company, say $50,000 a head of every illegal migrant that they had working there, they would think twice before having them work there, because they will work at pennies on the dollar. They'll work at half the price of the minimum wage. It's not that Americans, or in this case Brits, are not willing to do that work, is they're not willing to do it for that little amount of money. That's what the problem is. People like Narinda Kerr are an absolute joke. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash that thumbs up button for your boy. Consider subscribing to the channel. Help it grow. Catch you in the next one. Peace out, everybody.